Okay, thanks for your patience. Well, welcome to our third webinar in our Master Your Business webinar series. A few words before I introduce our speaker today. I'm Sean Wirt with the Enterprising Women of Color Business Center here at the YWCA Oahu. We're funded by the U.S. Department of Commerce and their agency called the Minority Business Development Agency. We're so happy to be one of 5 across the nation. So thank you so much for joining us. A few words about our center. Our programs and services are free, and we do focus on minority women business owners, but are open to all businesses across the state, the country, as well as the territories. So if you know of other business owners who may be interested in our services and programs, please help us spread the word. We invite you to take a look at our website. We have some other upcoming programs, as well as free one-on-one counseling. And one-on-one counseling includes marketing, financial counseling, business analysis, as well as SWOT. That's strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats counseling. So this is the third series in our third webinar in our Master Your Business series. Our next one is actually going to be on December 9th. If you go on our website, it's focused on insurance and bonds, what you really need to know, from a panel of 3 distinguished women in the business in Hawaii. So you can register for that. We'll pop our web address in the chat. And speaking of chat, if you have any questions at all during this webinar, please feel free to use the chat. We are trying to reserve about 15 minutes towards the end for a Q&A session. And finally, I just quickly ask if you can, after this webinar, take a quick survey. It's probably 30 seconds. Let us know if you enjoyed today's webinar and anything else our center can provide to you to help grow your business. And slides and recording of today's webinar will be made available on our website. And you may have received a set of advanced slides already with your Zoom link. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for today. For today's webinar, entitled, as you know, Best Practices for Family Business Owners. Our speaker is Mike Miyahira. Mike is the owner of Business Strategies, a company that provides guidance and advice to family business owners about general business matters, succession planning, family business governance issues, and strategic planning. Based in Hilo, his client base extends to all islands. And prior to starting Business Strategies in 1999, Mike was a senior lending officer for Bank of Hawaii and helped the bank start its business banking division in the late 70s. He spent more than 4 decades working with small businesses in the state of Hawaii. He's also under contract to provide accounting and administrative services to the Synergistic Hawaii Agriculture Council. It's a nonprofit that obtains county, state, and federal grants and contracts to fund marketing and technical assistance projects to support the floral, papaya, and coffee industries statewide. Mike is a member of the Scheidler Family Business Center of Hawaii and sits on its Big Island Advisory Board, a past president of several chambers of commerce and business organizations. He is also the immediate past chair of the trustees for the Lawyers Fund for Client Protection of the Supreme Court of Hawaii, where he served as a trustee for 25 years. Mike is also a past adjunct professor of business for the College of Business and Economics at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. Mike was also a manager and CFO for a land development group that successfully brought 560-acre project to market on the Big Island. Thank you so much, Mike, for making time for us. I know we're all looking forward to it. The floor is all yours.
Thanks, Sean. Wow, what an introduction. But, let's go back to, my experience with business. I spent over 4 decades working with small businesses statewide. And for the most part, these were family-owned businesses. And I noticed several things about them. They had certain common denominators. And one is they really focused in on maintaining relationships among themselves as far as the ownership groups are concerned. They focused in on good governance practices, how they related to the business, how they made decisions, the policies that they adopted among themselves, things of that nature. Successful multi-generational businesses looked at succession planning, and not only when they had to, but this is an event that they engaged in over a long period of time. And lastly, successful family businesses also focused a lot of their attention on strategic planning, looking long-term, where they wanted that business to go over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So these to me, as I look back on my experience working with family businesses, these four fundamental pillars, I think, are essential in looking at healthy, ongoing, multi-generational family businesses. Now, not everyone is lucky, or not everyone has smooth sailing, and there are a number of problems that family business owners run into, and here are a couple very common ones. The first off, and the most important one, is many of them don't engage in succession planning, or if they do, it's last minute, or it's not very in-depth. And as a result, what you have is either no next generation or an unprepared next generation. I recall talking to a business owner, and I asked him, how did you ever decide to succeed your father? And he told me, Mike, I didn't know I had a choice. Talking about no succession planning. And, the business and the family is just fortunate that he turned out to be a very successful business operator. Another problem that sometimes occurs is conflict within the family. And sometimes that conflict itself isn't necessarily apparent. I recall years ago helping a family owner, a business owner, put together a family employment policy. On what grounds would you hire a family member? And we thought it made sense. It's something that a lot of families do in terms of looking at what they want family members to do or prepare themselves, how they want to prepare themselves before asking or looking at employment within the family. And one of them was things like college degree. Another thing might be working outside the family for at least 3 to 5 years and have evidence successful, employment, be recognized for good work, things of that nature. And we broached it to the board that was made up of the family owners, and we encountered pushback. And lo and behold, the conflict was revealed. One of the aunts felt that her parents preferred the boys over the girls. And she felt that it was time that the boys gave the girls something. And she had a son that she wanted to have in management, and he didn't meet any qualifications. That conflict was something that blindsided us. And it led to some very hard discussions about where the business and the family was going. But conflict is, I think, something that a lot of families need to look out for and try and manage as best they can. Another problem I see a lot of times is governance challenges. Things like how do they make decisions? Who makes it? Who's engaged in it? What's the process? Also, accountability. Are the owners holding themselves accountable for the performance of the business? Another issue that arises a lot of times is entitlement. I hope you understand what entitlement means. Entitlement basically is getting something or thinking that you're deserving of something that you didn't earn. This happens a lot with family businesses. Another common problem that we see is with communication. And we'd like to think that people, it shouldn't be difficult to let people know what's going on. But oftentimes we find family business owners be very careful and screen the kind of communication that goes out to other family owners. And what happens is trust is sometimes put at risk, as well as the relationships. So this is a common problem that we see. Another problem that we see a lot of times is poor or no strategic planning. So as far as looking down the road, 5, 10, 15 years from now, a lot of businesses aren't prepared really to deal with the future. And so, this is a big problem. And oftentimes I find Some family businesses, it's like grandpa and grandma started it, mom and dad continued it, and now the next generation is prepared to take it on. But they don't have fundamental business skills. And this is a big issue. So these are some of the common problems. Going back to our, what we talked about earlier about the 4 pillars, how do we build, for example, trusting relationships? And, for a lot of families, how do you maintain the relationships that you have with the rest of your family members? And one of the things I always suggest to people is to practice what I call servant leadership. This is leadership that promotes communications both ways, from top down as well as around everyone else and back up to the top. Servant leaders really are there to enrich the lives of everyone and to build better organizations, not just for them, not just for the owners, not just for the president, but to build better organizations so everyone benefits. They're typically focused on growth and well-being of everyone and other shareholders, and they provide employees as well as the other owners with developmental opportunities. And these are, to me, truly servant leaders. They're there to make sure that everyone benefits from the experience. They want what is best for everyone and not just a few. Also, another strategy that helps to build or enhance existing relationships is to communicate openly and often. If you noticed, recall, servant leadership, that's part of it. And to me, it's building the relationships that you have as a leader with the rest of the organization and the ownership circle. I think adept family business owners are also good at managing conflict. They don't avoid it. I think avoiding conflict is one of the worst things you could do. Because when you do that, what happens is it's bound to come back sooner or later. And when it does, it's bigger and it's more difficult to deal with. So what good family business owners do is they welcome different points of view, and they have a process within which to consider opposing points of view, and they're good at building consensus. So in a way, they are managing conflict. And managing conflict is very important in terms of building that relationship with the rest of the owners. Good family business owners also encourage a clan mentality versus a branch. In other words, we're here for everyone's benefit, the entire family, the entire company, not just my family versus yours, but everyone. Okay. So they want to encourage that same sort of attitude, that same sort of outlook with the rest of the owners. And lastly, one of the things that good family business owners do is they try to achieve transparency in all that they have, in all the other things that they do and discuss with the rest of the ownership group. That transparency is very important. You want to build that trust. You want to have people depend upon what you say and not look for the hidden agendas. So transparency is super important. All right. Now, another one of the big pillars is succession planning. We talked about that earlier. And the question I always ask myself as I went door to door or business to business, asking people, but who's gonna, who do you have on your bench that's gonna succeed you one day? And oftentimes they look at me and says, well, what do you mean? And so I wondered, why don't more owners plan for succession? And these are some of the reasons that I was given. Oops, okay. Slow browser, okay. Okay, here are the reasons. First off, they're not sure if the next generation has what it takes. Well, frankly, until they get into the seat, you really don't know. But you can prepare them as best you can. Sometimes I hear the excuse that there's just too much work for me to get the next generation ready and not enough time. And so to me, I ask them, what are you going to do then? Sometimes the answer is, well, sell, or who knows what else they're going to do. Sometimes they don't even think about it. Another excuse I hear is the next generation isn't interested. And here, to me, it's like, okay, that means they haven't really worked with next generation to talk about the business and introduce them to it and build their interest in what was started previously and for them to take it on. Another reason I hear is, I'm just too old to start anything now. I just want to retire. So they sell. And sometimes I hear confusion that they've done their estate planning. So why do they need to worry about anything else? They don't understand that estate planning is not the same thing as succession planning. It's very, very different. Succession planning involves a lot more than just figuring out who gets what. In fact, estate planning is more for tax reasons as well as transferring assets to the next generation. Another problem I see oftentimes, in fact, I'm trying to deal with one right now, is it's difficult for the current owner to step back. Now, I'm involved in a multi-year process with one owner. We developed a succession plan, developing the next generation, but he doesn't want to retire. He doesn't know what to do with himself. So I'm trying to craft an exit strategy for him to keep him active, keep him busy, keep him connected, but out of the mainstream. But for some owners, it's really difficult for them to step back. When I was in my lending career, I actually had one owner who was suffering from dementia, and no one wanted to step up and tell him, hey, I think you need to really think about your personal health because you're starting to forget a lot of things. No one wanted to do that or approach the subject with him. So I think for about 3 years, they kept holding management meetings. And the management meetings, they kept talking about the same things. And it was really difficult for them. Some owners are just poor planners also. And so they have a difficult time thinking about what to do long term. And so succession planning is just not on the horizon. And some don't want to spend the time training and mentoring for the next generation. They just don't have the patience to do that, which is really kind of too bad. Because when you think about it, the success of that business, if it's transferred to the next generation, would continue to provide the family with the benefits of ownership. So if owners think about it long term, I think they'd spend the time that's needed to prepare the next generation adequately. My advice to everyone is start early. And there's no real, I think, gauge in terms of starting at a certain age. But you want to start at a certain point where they can, I think, their attention span is adequate enough so they can understand what it is that the business does. And you want to cultivate their interest in the business. One of my clients is in retailing, and he gave each of his boys a shelf in his store. And he basically told them, it's up to you to decide what to put on that shelf. And anything you make, any profit you make, that's yours. And we'll help you in terms of helping you order things, we'll help you in terms of paying the taxes and whatever. But you have to make the decision on what people will buy, and you have to maintain the shelves yourself. So in a way, he was trying to generate their interest in retailing, as well as build entrepreneurship in that, with it. So cultivating next generation's interest, very important for him. And it worked out fairly well for him. I think one of his sons is involved heavily in the business, and the other decided to pursue a different career, but he sits on their board. So I think that both boys contribute greatly to the company. Start early and develop the next generation's business and managerial skill sets. And how do you do that? And especially if they're still in like intermediate or high school or college, how do you build their business and managerial skill sets? And a lot of that could be in terms of getting them involved in projects, getting them involved in clubs and social organizations and service groups, encouraging them to step up into leadership positions within those organizations and to manage them and lead people. And in addition, you can also involve them in your business if they are located close to you, and give them assignments. get them involved in doing things with your business. And explore the next generation's ability to lead. And this is, I think, where it becomes crucial in looking at or involving them in situations where they have to manage groups of people. Maybe manage groups of fellow students, maybe manage groups of people at work. But explore their ability to lead, because it's so critical, so important as we look at the ability of the next generation's abilities to step up and succeed you. So start early. That's my advice to all of you. And also, you want to develop teamwork amongst the next generation, because the ownership will probably be passed down to not just siblings, but if you're like second or third generation, you may have cousins involved as well. And so getting them to be able to work together as a team is really important. Communicate among themselves, get involved, see who steps up as far as leading the group, and making sure that they get along with each other. Develop teamwork amongst the next generation. One other thing that's really important is to pass along the family history and legacy. Know how the business was started, where the founders came from, grandpa and grandma or whoever, and how they built that business. Because I think there is, with many family businesses, a history to be proud of. So pass along the family history and the legacy. And lastly, pass along ownership. Decide who gets it, when they get it, and how. It seems simple, but not really. Now, you'd like to be able to pass along ownership to those children which have the greatest potential to help the business move forward. Well, how do you do that without slighting the others? So that's a challenge. Question then is, when do you do it? And sometimes that's a tax-driven question more than anything else. But I think, when, who, and when, very important. And how, and again, this is a question of, do you sell it? Do you gift it? Do you do a combination of that? So think about these things early, because they would basically guide your actions in the future as far as succession planning is concerned. Okay, some other thoughts on succession planning. Encourage entrepreneurship, whether it's with your company or elsewhere. Encourage them to be involved. I used to always, when I was a young kid, used to always cringe whenever we had fundraisers, because that meant going out and selling whatever it is that our class had to sell, or our club had to sell in order to raise money. But it taught me about selling. It taught me a lot of things about working with others to sell. And I think as a result, I became a better salesman, so to speak. But encourage entrepreneurship. You want to also prepare them to one day become part of a management team. And in addition to that, being part of your management team. So part of the struggle is also preparing your management team for the eventuality that there will be next generation coming up through the ranks and joining them to help run the company. I think for most people who work for family businesses, they're kind of prepared for this in a way, but I think for them to rub shoulders with the next generation members coming up is very important. They need to gauge who these people are, get an appreciation for their abilities and their skill sets, and vice versa. So preparing your management team as well as preparing your heirs to work with the management team is very important. And of course, the question then becomes, who is going to succeed you? Who's going to succeed all the owners? And so this is a difficult question, but it needs to be talked about with everyone. And there are different strategies as far as choosing a successor, but you want to be fair. You want to be, I think you want to encourage a process that looks at the best qualified individual who become the leader. And lastly, exit strategies, current owners, very, very important. You want to be able to depart in good graces and leave the company in such fashion that it's well maintained, well handled, but still be available in case they need to reach out and contact you in the future. So exit strategies are very important. Another one of the pillars is governance. Talked about that briefly. And for family businesses, we encourage them to think about building a series of policies and agreements among themselves about certain things. One of them could be things like the roles and responsibilities they have as owners and other family members. Another policy that they might have is respecting the boundary, or agreement is respecting the boundary that exists between owners and management. Very, very important. As an owner, that doesn't mean that you manage the business. You may sit on the board, you may provide direction and guidance, but it's the management that you have within the company that run it. Now, for some family businesses, you may be an owner and a manager, in which case the boundary may be very low, or there may be no boundaries at all. But for those family businesses which are larger, ownership might be just sitting on the board, and you might have your own professional management team. That's where respecting the boundary between owners and managers becomes very important. Now, family constitutions also look at policies and agreements regarding a wide variety of things. Things, for example, like employment. On what basis would a family business hire a family member? Now, you think about it, what would prevent, or under what conditions would you hire a family member? Would it be driven by need, or would you hire any family member who wants a job? I think it's very important to think about the qualifying factors under which you would employ a family member. So employment policy is very important. Compensation as well. What do you pay family members in your business? Do you pay them a going wage? Do you pay them a premium because they're family members? What do you do? Very important to talk about this as a family. Also, policies regarding performance. As a family member working in the company, what are the expectations you have about the quality of the work and the work ethic? Performance becomes very important, as well as accountability, holding them accountable for what they do. Increasingly, we see the involvement of things like code of conduct or policies regarding personal ethics. And also in here would be things like conflicts of interest. It's very important, I think, for family members to really look at holding themselves accountable for everything, as well as the standards of conduct being extremely high, because basically they set the tone for the rest of the company. Well, 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking to a family business owner, and this is a fairly large family business. And they recently encouraged or welcomed or invited 2 family members to sell their interest. Over the problem they encountered was violations of conflicts of interest. They're trying to direct the family to send business their way instead of outsourcing to third-party contractors, and not because they have more expertise, but because they're a family, and so they should be taken care of. And the board just basically invited them to sell their interest because they were concerned about whose interest was being really looked after. And so they basically threw 2 family members out of the board, out of the company. Code of conduct and ethics is really important. Another one of my clients is a contractor, and they historically would extend a contract to one of the cousins to do a certain amount of work. And I asked during a planning session, is this contract extended to you on a preferential basis? And they didn't know. They had never let that contract out to bid. They'd always given it to the one cousin. And out of curiosity, one of the board members sent out an RFP to a couple of their vendors and found out that they could get other people to do the work on a much cheaper basis. That caused all sorts of problems. But at the same time, there was recognition that this cousin didn't have the best interests of the family or the business when he extended his offer to do the work. Code of conduct and ethics is playing a larger role with many family businesses, and I think deservedly so. Lastly, one of the things we have to talk about when we look at policies and agreements is enforcement. What do you do if a family member violates a policy or an agreement? Maybe it's a small or simple violation, or maybe it's a large one, like the two family members or the cousin who directed work in there towards themselves. But the infractions need to be talked about, need to be dealt with, and if they're egregious enough, then something needs to be done. And one of the worst things that you could do is basically tell them, look, you don't belong with us. It's time that we bought you out. But enforcement is something that needs to happen sooner or later for those family members who just don't have the best interests of everyone at heart. Now, we also have beyond family constitutions, a bunch of agreements that I think pertain to owners. And these agreements could be things like a buy-sell agreement. And the question would be, under what conditions would you buy? On what conditions would you sell? And one of the things that we'd like to do, or we encourage family business owners, is to consider what might happen in the event something unpleasant happens to a family member. Say for example, if they get into a car accident and they are horribly crippled and can no longer function, maybe there's an opportunity for you to, or them, to sell their interest in the company, get some financial compensation in return, and use it to pay for some of the expenses. Or in the case of, for example, a family member who comes down with dementia and is no longer capable of making rational decisions. I think at that point, definitely you want to have the ability to buy back their interest before they do damage to themselves as well as the company. Also, in the case of, for example, a divorce or bankruptcy, what might happen is the third party must step into the ownership position. And that you really don't know how well they're going to get along with everybody else. So buy-sell agreements are really important. We also encourage the use of prenuptials or even postnuptials. In the event, for example, we encourage ownership to stay within the bloodline. The rationality is blood is stronger than water, and so with prenuptials is the agreement that the spouse, the in-law spouse, would not have any interest in the company if things don't work out. Other agreements also include retirement policies, for example. At what point would you, as an owner, retire? And this is kind of like, goes hand in hand with exit strategies. And so with retirement policies, everyone knows that when you reach a certain age or certain benchmarks, that would be the point when you start to look at retirement. Another agreement might be core values. When we talk about code of ethics and code of conduct, core values have a very similar kind of thing, effect rather. But they also look at, I think, what's important to you, how you make decisions, and how you work. Especially in the event or in the case of issues that surround problems like entitlement as well as stewardship. So core values, very important. Moving on to other issues with other item or subject matter with governance is boards. Now, a lot of small family businesses don't have boards, and we encourage them to do so, form their own board. And not just to professionalize their performance, but also looking at getting outside points of view, sitting on their board, giving them new perspectives. So one of the things we do is encourage them to look for outside representation. Now, sometimes families don't like to have outsiders involved in sitting in on board meetings. And so in that case, we suggest to them to consider forming advisory boards made up of members of the business community or otherwise, who can provide them with good advice as well as new information about things that they may not be comfortable with. So advisory boards would be, I think, a good addition in the event that your family does not want to bring in outside representation to sit on your board. We also suggest the formation of what we call family councils. A family council is basically a grouping of all the family members involved as owners rather. And this is the group or the forum in which a lot of problems, agreements, and policies can be hashed out. And also, family council can also be the means for you to educate family members about common concerns. For example, tax planning or estate planning issues. It could be about education of the next generation. It could be learning new business skills. It could be a lot of different things. But we encourage the formation of family councils to pass along the information as well as being the forum to talk about common problems and challenges. We also encourage the use of family retreats. Family retreats can be the means within which you can train the next generation, introduce ideas, introduce new skills, talk to them about the history of the company, pass along traditions. And it could be building relationships with other parts of the family. With one family group I took years ago, and this particular family's business was in craft, looking at making things. So we spent one morning doing several craft projects so that the next generation could familiarize themselves with the products that the family sold in their business. And it was eye-opening for them, as well as for the parents, to look at the skills or lack of that the next generation had. Family treats are really, I think, important, and it's a time that all the family members can get together and basically strengthen the relationships that they have with each other. But whatever you do, what we'd like to focus on is educating family members, managing their wealth, talking about business concepts, how to resolve conflicts or disagreements amongst themselves, and information about the business. The last item that I wanted to talk about is strategic planning. Now, again, when we talked about this briefly at the very beginning, and my concern with a lot of family businesses is that they don't engage in strategic planning, which to me is kind of disappointing, because there's so many benefits from undertaking this kind of effort. Strategic planning can really help a lot of businesses really look at where they want to be 5, 10, 15 years from now, and look at new direction. You want to involve a lot of people. You want to involve key stakeholders in the business as well as a family ownership group. And if they're involved in that process, then by just being part of it, they tend to buy in better, rather than sit on the sidelines and just read or listen to what other people have basically developed. Years ago, I was involved with a family, and they were statewide retailer, and we were talking about what we wanted the business to be. We had their managers from the various branches of the company together, talking about what we wanted to achieve over the next 10 years. This company at the time was doing about $33 million a year in sales. And we asked them collectively, what do you think we should be looking like in the end of 10 years? And they said, if we can double in size, going from 33 to say 66, 67 million in sales, that'd be terrific. Somebody whipped out their calculator and figured it out. That's approximately 6% compounded each year. 6% growth compounded each year. And if you think about it, one component of that is inflation. And if inflation's running, say, 2.5% to 3%, that means that you're really growing from about 3 to 3.5% a year. It's really not much. Anyone can do that. So those of us who were managing the strategic planning process turned around and said, let's shoot for the moon. How about if we say that in 10 years, we'll grow the company 4 times the size that it is today. Our goal is 125 million. And all the managers almost fell off the chairs. How in the world are we going to do that? But we all buckled down and we figured out, okay, this is doable. Now, we don't know how, but we'll figure out a way. In 7 years, they surpassed 91 mil. And in 10 years, they weren't quite at 120. They were about 101. But you talk about such a world of difference. The benefits to the company, the benefits to the stakeholders, obvious. So why more companies don't engage in strategic planning, I think, is a disappointment. Well, so we look at the strategic planning process. One of the first things we want to talk about is, why do you do what you do? Okay? What's the primary purpose for your business? I used to ask that a lot when I was a lender. And I asked it a lot as a family business consultant. Why do you do what you do? And for most of them, the answer was to make money. Well, you can make money in a variety of different ways. But why do you do specifically what you do? Why do you do it? And for some people, that's a difficult question, but it needs to be answered. Why, as a retailer, do you sell to sell? As a wholesaler, why do you sell that product line to represent the products that you do? As a restaurant person, why do you operate that restaurant? What's the primary purpose? If you can figure that out, it's really important. Disney used to have a mission statement, and I think it spoke loudly to what they did and gave meaning to their operation. Their mission statement was very simple. We make people happy. Powerful. That's their primary purpose. Figure it out for your business. Why do you do what you do? Very important. Next, set up on a vision. What do you want to achieve over the long term? This might be really difficult, but it's something that you need to think about for yourself. What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be 5, 10 years from now? Also, identify the values that are important to you. It could be things like work ethic, honesty, integrity, accuracy, relationships with others. It could be a host of different things. But the values are important in terms of how you do business and the people that you do business with. I used to train management trainees a long time ago with the bank that I used to work with. And we would hire between 15 and 30 trainees a year. And at the end of the year, we'd end up with maybe a half a dozen or so. We could hire based upon skill sets. We could hire based upon experience. But one of the things we had a difficult time with was identifying core values, the values that were similar to ours. And that's where we inevitably had issues with the different sets of values. And that's probably the reason why a lot of them went separate ways. So recognize that values are really important, and get yours down on paper so that everyone knows where you're coming from. And a very important part of the strategic planning process is translating your vision into specific goals and objectives, and how they exist to help you achieve your vision. Doing the goals and objectives really depends upon looking at internal examination as well as external examination of your business, looking at what you're good at, what you're not good at, things of that nature. One of the challenges of being in business is keeping up with change. And change is inevitable. In fact, when you look at the effects of the pandemic over the last 1.5 to 2 years, they really accelerated. It causes the problem with the pandemic is that it really accelerated the pace of change. The pandemic forced us to look at how we do business with our customers very, very differently. In fact, even this webinar today, How would we have presented it otherwise if we didn't have the pandemic to deal with? It'd probably be in person. But now we're using video conferencing to do a lot of things, to hold meetings, to basically educate others. It's a different way of doing business, and basically we're all responding to change. Well, change also affects our customers as well. How they buy, when they buy, why they buy. I think I recall reading something recently that over 30% of sales is now occurring via online shopping. And if you looked at my household, I think you'd nod your head in agreement. Yeah. They also impact our operations, looking at how we do things, our processes, even how we sell. Many more businesses nowadays maintain active selling online sites where people can come in and place orders actively through a portal on the website. On their website, one of my clients is a wholesaler of dry goods as well as cleaning chemicals, and they have an active portal that leads the buyer through their inventory, where they can select and order different products. It's a much more efficient process for them. Gets the order into their books and into their delivery and accounting system rapidly, and it speeds up the transaction. It reduces the amount of time people have to handle it. A great advantage, a great change for them. And their suppliers are also affected. As you are affected by things of change, so are they. And so is your competition. So always keep your eye out in terms of what's happening there. Now, strategic planning process is really designed to help you do just that. Constantly looking at internal and external factors that affect your business. Strategic planning starts with making sure that you fully understand why you do what you do and where you want to go. And the process involves, I think you should involve a lot of people who are key stakeholders in your business. Very, very important. Now, I think some of you have heard of the term SWOT. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is your internal and external examination. So we look at what you're good at doing, what you're not good at doing, where the opportunities lie, and where are you vulnerable. This is what the SWOT is all about. Now, I personally augment that by looking at customer and competition. How well do we know our customer, and how well we know our competition? Because oftentimes we continue to sell what we sell just because we can sell it. But have we ever stepped back and asked ourselves, what do our customers really want, and where are they going? How are they changing? Because I'm sure they are themselves. So knowing customers well will help you look at product and service delivery and any changes you need to make to keep up with their wants and needs. Same thing with your competition. How are they changing? What are their competitive advantages, and what are your competitive advantages? Identify what they are. Then look at the big challenge. Where are the big hurdles and obstacles that you might have? It could be internal, it could be external. But you need to identify and prioritize according to where the biggest needs are. Advances in technology are happening all the time. It's amazing to me how quickly our simple little cell phone, our wireless device, has morphed into an entertainment device, a camera, a movie camera, an order entry mechanism, a GPS finder. Boy, the use for the cell phone has not stopped, and it'll continue to change as we move on. Advances in technology keep on happening every day. In fact, look for it in your business as well. Ask yourself, what's happening in my industry? What's happening with my competition? What are they doing better than we are? use technology whenever it's available. And likewise, technology is often driven by innovation. And innovation often means better service, better products, cheaper, faster, better use of man hours. So look at innovation, encourage it within your own business. Employ a technique or a process called strategy screening. Now, just because somebody comes up with a neat little strategy doesn't mean that it's something that you pursue. What you need to do is set up a list of criteria that basically help you identify what strategies make sense and what strategies don't. So for example, the screening might be, the questions might be things like the outcome has to be predictable, or the outcome has to lead to an 80% probability that we will be profitable or generate surplus operations, or the strategy will result in a reduction in overtime. But have these screening questions available so as you look at every strategy, you can, help you identify which strategies make sense and which ones don't. Okay, then once you've done that and decided on which strategies to pursue, you then need to start looking at specifically how do you make them happen. Now, this is where action plans come in. Action plans basically ask, who's going to do it? When are they going to do it? When are they going to complete it? Why? And what exactly are they going to do? That's the action planning part of it. And I think a lot of times when I see strategic plans, I ask people, what have you done with them? And unfortunately, sometimes it's just sitting on a shelf somewhere because they haven't made that step to actually put them into operation. So action planning is very important. And for members of the next generation, the question I have for them is, have you been involved in the process? If your company's done strategic planning, were you involved? And if you are, where do we go from here? Where would you like to take the company? So involve the next generation as much as possible as well. Okay. Next steps for family businesses. You need to decide what do you do? Where do you go from here? If you haven't done succession planning, do you start that effort? You start reading up and educating yourself about what you need to do. If you've never thought about building relationships, then decide, is this something you want to do? And if so, what kind of things do you need to do to build those relationships or enhance the relationships that already exist? Do you look at governance and do you have policies and agreements between owners already? If not, decide. Right? Is this something that will help you and help your family? Have you ever undertaken strategic planning? If you haven't, decide. It'll benefit you if you do. When is a good time to start? When do you think? I would say now is a good time. There's no bad time to start. And somebody told me once, gee, my kids are in elementary school. When should I start talking or thinking about succession planning? They're kind of young, aren't they? And maybe they are for being personally involved. But then at the same time, if you were to look at management structure, management team in your business, in fact, do you have one? Is the company prepared, or will the company be ready to incorporate them or accommodate them at the point that they become available? What do you need to do to prepare the company to offer them opportunities to be part of the management team? Decide. When is a good time to start? I think now is a pretty good time. Now, for family business owners, you have resources available to help you. And in most large metropolitan cities, a lot of universities have family business centers. And for those of us in Hawaii, the UH Shidler College of Business, located in Manoa, operates the Family Business Center of Hawaii. And chapters are located on Oahu, Maui, and the Big Island. Okay, members, I think there's about 89 members, member families that are part of the Family Business Center. And for those of you in other cities, look at the different colleges or universities that you have around you and see if you have a Family Business Center. A lot of them have. Like I was up in Madison, Wisconsin years ago, about 9 or 10 years ago, and they had a Family Business Center. I had sometimes I talked with the executive director, and frankly, our problems were their problems, the same thing. There were no real regional differences. I was in Boston and talked to someone up there, same thing, same problems, same scenarios. Just because you're on the East Coast or Midwest or Central or Hawaii, California, it didn't matter. I think our problems are kind of common across the broad spectrum. Now you can also talk to other family business owners and get ideas of how they dealt with the problems themselves. And I think when we look at people to give us advice as well as mentor us, forming relationships with other owners of family businesses can be a real, I think, help, big help for many of us. And there are also a lot of publications that are available. If you go on the web and into bookstores, you see a lot of written material on ideas and different things that you can take back and talk about things that you can do to help your family business. Okay. So again, looking at the 4 basics or 4 foundational things involved with family businesses, very important, I think, building that relationship amongst the owners, forming good governance structures, looking at succession planning early, getting the next generation involved, and engaging you and your family in strategic planning. Very, very important things. All right, that kind of concludes the presentation. So there were a couple of questions that were posed in the registration process, and I'll try to answer them at this point. There are 2 questions that were related. The first one was, how can I make the transition? And a related question was, any suggestions on kids working in the business? The sons are 13 and 14 years old. Well, I have a couple of brief suggestions, but really, it's, I think, understanding the in-depth circumstances is is important as well. And I would suggest to you that what you do depends on the ages of the next generation and their interests and the current station in life. But what you'd like to do is develop their interest in the business. Give them something to do at work, something that fits their abilities and interests, and provides them with a learning experience. And if you can make it entertaining, all the better. Encourage them to work with others, and if they are in school, then service clubs and student organizations really help. Encourage them to lead projects and be involved and benefit by working with students of their own age, and experience of leading, getting them the experience of leading and managing. And as their abilities grow, move them to assignments in your business that are more challenging and a lot more meaningful. For older next-gen members who are in college or beyond, they're capable of assimilating a lot more information. So talk to them about the business, talk to them about industry knowledge, educate them about the challenges that your business faces and what things are important to know. And for those of us who end up working for someone else, that real-world experience will provide them with the ability to compare. This is something that we recommend in any case. Okay. Sean, were there other questions that were posed in the presentation?
There were, thanks, Mike. Before, we've received 2 other questions, but before I go into those, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat And if you'd like to stay a little more anonymous, you can send them over to the MBDA EWOC YWCA. Joanne, my colleague, will be fielding those questions to me, so we won't. We can keep those pretty confidential and just read out the question. So please do that if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go into the 2 questions we have received so far. One of the questions, Mike, is how large should a company be before suggesting they have a board? I think it's because you mentioned board governance and so forth.
I don't think there's any minimum size. I think a lot has to do with the experience and awareness that the existing owners or board members have. There's nothing that says a board member has to be an owner. And having board members who are external provides you with that different perspective, different opinion. And if, for some family businesses, they don't feel comfortable having an outsider sit in a meeting where they're talking about their financial condition or any kinds of issues like that. So in that case, I would say, form an advisory board, or even don't make it formal, just go and take somebody to lunch and ask them, what do you think? Where's the market going? Where do you see opportunities? In fact, I had an opportunity to have breakfast with the head of one of our larger insurance companies here in Hawaii. And he always impressed me by his selection of people. Whenever he had a need, he always had somebody that he had his eye on, and he recruited. And I asked him, how in the world do you do that? He's so successful at finding good people. And he told me, Mike, throughout my life, I've been involved in so many different things. And every once in a while, I'll stumble upon someone that I find to be very interesting. Perhaps from the work experience, perhaps by what they say, but I'll remember who they are. And maybe I don't have a vacancy or a need right now, but I might have next week, next year, or months or years from now. And if I can keep track of them, I'll certainly follow up. So that outside advice, outside experience, I retain. And frankly, I kind of follow his lead. And wherever I meet interesting people, I try to remember them. And I pass along that advice to all my clients as well. But whether it's on an advisory board or having people like that sit on your board, it's important to get that outside different perspective.
That's great advice, Mike. Our second question is, how do you handle a situation where family members who are in the business perhaps are unable to think strategically? What can a company do to ensure it's sustainable?
Good question. For a lot of businesses who've never done strategic planning before, it's really difficult the first time around. In fact, the first time around might be a steep learning curve for a lot of people. But I would say get an outside party to come in to help you, because there's a certain amount of training that takes place ahead of time or during the process. And this is where you can take someone who's not involved in the process before, or they're very uncomfortable or unfamiliar with strategic planning, and turn them into somebody who can be a real contributor to future plans and future discussions. So get an outside person involved.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I think some people had to drop off for some other meetings. Because we're a small enough group, if anyone would like to ask a question verbally, we welcome you to do that at this time. Otherwise, maybe 30 more seconds. If anyone else has any questions, you can submit them to our center's Zoom account name, which is MBDA EWOC YWCA Oahu, if you'd like to keep that anonymous. And we can ask that question for you. So now would be the time. And Mike's been so succinct, boiling down his decades of experience, that we're actually ahead of time. It's 1:06. So, but I would like to give a final opportunity for any last questions you may have.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please identify yourself if you'd like,
hi.
and if not, you can just go ahead and ask. Thank you.
I'm Flame Kila, and I really enjoyed today's session. and I'm just getting started for my own business. So this is really wealthy for me now. And I wanted to ask, what is the difference between an agreement and a contract?
Basically, they speak to the same thing. In other words, the two or more parties agree to do certain things.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Sean.
No, I was going to say, Flame, if you have any other questions about, more legal things, our center can help you with that or make a referral to, there are some free to low cost legal services that we can refer you to as well. So I don't know if you have a follow-up question. Thank you for your feedback. And if you have a follow-up question or if Mike, sorry, Mike, I cut you off. Please go ahead.
So that would be good for me. Yeah. Thank you anyway.
Thank you.
Mike, I enjoyed your sharing, really very wealthy, and everything you said is like, I never thought about what kind of conflicts can happen in a family business, but I'm glad that you opened my mind and my eyes to things that can happen.
Oh, you're welcome.
Gotta be tough love sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. I think knowing how to handle or manage yourself when conflict arises is really important for any family business owner. And not that you want to be adversarial to it, but I think being open to listen to what they have to say and be prepared to compromise if needed.
Yes.
Thank you, Flame, for your question. If there are no other, go ahead, please.
No, I was just saying you're welcome.
Oh, thank you. If no one has any other questions, I want to thank Mike for taking time to share his wealth of knowledge and really encouraging us to be strategic. That was a lot covered, Mike. So one step at a time, but as Mike said, there's no bad time to start. Today would be great. So let us know if we can help in any way here at the Business Center, or perhaps if you want to request Mike back for a follow-up session. I don't know, but we'll pop the survey link in the chat for a bit. And then we'll also send a follow-up email and let you also know when the recording and the slides are available on our website. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to Mike, most of all, for making time. That's it for us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Aloha.
Hey, aloha.